in Syria today as a government crackdown continues against a pro-democracy movement there. There is now an official response from some of the international community. Officials on the top human rights body in the United Nations have just approved an investigation into the deadly actions of Syrian forces and demanding Syrian officials immediately release political prisoners. As I reported earlier in this hour, the president today, President Obama, signed an executive order outlining new sanctions. With us now from Washington, the former director of strategy for the White House Homeland Security Council, Mike Barrett, is with us. Mike, I've been reading over the wires here in London this sort of cascading series of developments. First, we get that the fighting has intensified. Then we understand that protesters are being murdered. Then we understand it's spilling across the border. Then we understand that a huge prison outbreak, in fact, 2 of them have happened in Tunisia, and it looks like somebody's just tipped a domino, and you wonder where it ends.
Well, that's right, and I think, you know, one of the things that you see is that Fridays are always a big day in the Middle East. It's the day of prayer, and so a lot more people go out, and they end up in the center cities. They go to the mosque, and then afterwards they tend to have their larger rallies. And so that's why we see this cycle where almost every Friday now for the last 6-7 weeks, we've had major protests.
But, you know, Mike, in Syria, it seems to be more coordinated and better organized than before. It was my understanding in one of the smaller cities on the outskirts of Damascus that there was suddenly an outbreak that nobody had expected. It was put down with a great deal of violence, and you saw those pictures of the shoe on Bashar al-Assad's face. That may look like just a demonstration to us, but there it means quite a lot.
It does, but I think you're seeing, you know, tremendous unrest. One of the problems, of course, is that there's no ability for the people to express their will in this country, and so you've got a dictator. You know, he's been there, his family's been there for 40 years. There's no way for the people to express anything. But what we're seeing now is, of course, that the Muslim Brotherhood is part of the uprising, and so, you know, for the U.S., we get stuck between a rock and a hard place. We've got a lot of significant interest in Syria, but, you know, diplomatic and intelligence sources are saying, you know, this could come out really bad if the regime does go. You know, you got to be really worried about who's going to be in place.
You do have to worry about that. Of course, the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is still trying to call Bashar al-Assad a man of reform there. And certainly that has been the game that we've been playing for years and years and years. You need Syria because it's Syria that gives you, there he is all smiling, it's Syria that gives you the protection of a sort of comfort zone with Israel. It's they who have the agreement with Israel. It's they who seem to be peace players with Israel. Yet in the end, we've learned over and over for decades and decades, when you prop up murdering dictators, you end up in a bad place.
You do. I mean, I think there's no arguing that. But I do think we also have to be mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, Syria matters, but Iran matters more. I mean, really, the Iranian nuclear program is kind of the elephant in the room. And at the end of the day, if we expend all of our diplomatic intelligence and, you know, God forbid, military capabilities dealing with Syria, then, you know, we're not going to have anything left to deal with Iran if and when that explodes. So, I mean, what you see is, I mean, it's a very troubled region, as you said at the beginning of the spot.
It is, and you mentioned it, Syria and Iran. I think our viewers have come to learn, as we've all come to learn, how Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon and Syria and Iran are all tied together, and so much of this is a proxy of a much bigger thing. And I know that observers from the outside would very much like to stop this, but those on the inside have proved in country after country that it's not an easy thing to do. And you just wonder where it is that the United States need to end up at this point as the ones who are trying to be leaders in all of this.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And for me, you know, where I come down on this is 2 words that we haven't heard much recently, which is Al-Qaeda. I mean, you know, we had the story earlier in the hour about how the Germans had rolled up some Al-Qaeda operatives. And that's one of the things we got to remember, too. I mean, with all this unrest here, and you see that going on in Yemen as well, all the unrest in the region means that these regimes are focused on survival, which means that they're not doing the things that they've been helping us do for 9 years in terms of trying to keep an eye on the terrorist. And, you know, the one thing that the regimes over there have figured out is that they really better keep an eye on Al-Qaeda, because that will get the U.S. involved heavily. And one of the challenges that I think we're going to face is, over time, if they're not paying attention to that, then what else is going to come out of the region?
Mike Barrett live with us. Mike, thanks very much for joining us from Washington. Well, we've all seen the videos, the